After the adventures of the last couple days, I was glad to handle something normal at work. Even more glad that it was my turn at the zoo across town and that no animals were missing there. I triple-checked, but each Earth creature was accounted for. That meant I could throw myself into the usual tasks and pretend there wasn't a crisis unfolding. Thankfully, no big projects were waiting for me today. The permanent human staff usually handled most of that, with occasional assistance from those of us who rotated in from the vet center. None of the Earth animals on exhibit needed medical attention today, so it was all a matter of routine care, hoof trimmings and such, followed by a wardrobe change and some interaction with the public. I was a bit worried about that part. The crowd was distinctly smaller than normal, but the youngsters were just as excited as always. "Hey there, kids! Want to meet some animals from my planet? This one will let you touch her if you're nice." The turtledillo children oohed and awed and reached out timid hands to brush the fur of the most exotic of Earth creatures, a very tame pony. Her name was Dusty, and she didn't bat an eye at even the most shrill-voiced alien child, of which there were several today. "It's so weird!" shrieked the closest one, waving all four arms in excitement. "Yup," I said. "She came all the way from Earth. Want to pet her? She likes it if you stroke her like this." I ran my fingers across the short fur. Petting was good, scratching was bad. Someone had realized early on that rockback claws were often extremely sharp, given the fashion preferences of the individual in question, so we had strict, no-scratching rules. Two other kids took me up on it while their parents watched from a few steps behind, near the edge of the wood-fenced enclosure. The loud one just danced around the sunny area, commenting on how the pony was the most bizarre creature ever. Luckily, there was no pony poop on the ground to dodge around, just a bin of aromatic hay and a water trough. When I'd first learned which animals humanity would be contributing to this zoo, I had an unprofessional giggle fit. I'd expected tigers and elephants, the type of impressive beasts that were staples of zoos at home. But everything earthly was impressive to these folks, so logic had dictated that we send only the safest choices. That meant pets and livestock. We had cats and dogs, pigs and ponies, 2 horses, and a small flock of chickens. I'd heard that sheep were next on the approved list, but there was no sign of them yet. Ponies remained one of the most popular, thanks to their temperaments and petting zoo experience. We could have set up a pony ride, and they wouldn't have minded, but early discussions had found that the average turtledillo would be more frightened than excited by the experience. "Why are its feet like that?" "Those are called hooves," I explained. "Imagine if you just had one toe on each foot and the claw was big and flat." "Weird." "A lot of animals with hooves are a big help on my planet," I said, flicking a glance at the parents. Still not scowling? Good. "They're good at pulling and carrying things. Some of the bigger ones even carry people." "Whoa," said one child. "How?" said another. "Do you lie across its back?" "No, we ride it." I struck a wide-legged stance. "This little pony is much too small for me, but there are 2 horses around the corner that way. They're taller than I am." "What? That's so big?" "Yep. If you're still here this afternoon, you can watch me ride one. There's a sign that says what time it happens." The kids looked like I'd promised to ride a shark, impressed and alarmed in equal measures. I knew from experience that it was the idea of being on top of any large animal that scared them. They weren't natural climbers, these guys. Wobbling around at twice their own height would have been terrifying. "Mom, can we watch?" "We'll check the sign." "I want to see too." I smiled at all the approval. You wouldn't think humanity's reputation had taken a nosedive at all. I'd been braced for an empty zoo, with no audience for when I put Flora through her paces. My riding skills were not expert level by any means, but I could stay in the saddle well enough, and on normal days the turtledillos loved watching a qualified human ride a horse about. Positive signs, I told myself. Positive signs. I finished up the petting zoo session and moved on to the next thing. The day was still young. While logic said that the only turtledillos to be visiting the Earth animals were those with a favorable opinion of Earth, I wasn't about to assume anything. For all I knew, protesters would show up to insist that all of the animals get shipped back. There were a few dirty looks at the first show and tell, from zoo visitors who sneered at the golden retrievers and kept walking. Oh well, they didn't get to see how well a dog can catch a tennis ball, or how happy these two were to run a simple obstacle course and earn crunchy treats. I only had 2 people stay for the second half, which was definitely their loss. The elderly couple were delighted to learn how a chicken worked, and when I presented them with 1 large wing feather each, shed, collected, and cleaned beforehand, they couldn't contain their joy. "This is an honor," said the shorter female. "We will get a display case made immediately." I was humbly waving off the gratitude when the taller female continued, "These will be incredibly valuable in a few years when there are no more." She looked at me kindly. "I hope you get some similar souvenirs to take back to your homeworld." Thanks. I'll see what I can do." I didn't argue with their assumption, simply waving them on their way and gathering up Flapper the Bold in silence. No one else walked by while I returned the chicken to her pen. The rest of the morning followed in that vein. No drama, but subtle moments that made me wince internally. The only time someone had even asked about the escaped animals, it was a quiet question while I walked from one exhibit to another. I answered honestly that we still didn't know what had happened, but the situation was being handled. The solemn young man nodded and left it at that. By lunchtime, I was on edge. I half expected to hear a mob in the parking lot, either more reporters or the portion of the general populace with negative opinions of Earthlings at the moment. I peeked past the ticket takers to see. No crowds. Whew! I skedaddled off toward the employee area with thoughts of sandwiches and apples. Halfway there, I was brought up short by someone familiar running toward me. It was Zephyr, the accountant. He of lavender gray shell paint, good problem-solving skills, and a love of chattering away like the wind he was named for. "Please come to a free lunch," he said, panting to a stop. "Do you have time right now? It's important." Taken aback, I said, "I've got a bit of time. Why is a free lunch important?" Instead of answering, Zephyr waved me closer, which meant bending nearly double. I sat down on the low rock wall outside the gift shop and listened. "I talked to Lumi," he said, as if that was significant. "She has connections. One of her siblings upholds the law and the other 2 break it. She knows things about the smuggling underground." I looked at him sharply. He hadn't been part of the conversation yesterday. "Is that where the animals came from?" "There's no one else it could be," Zephyr said. "Lumi is going to use her connections to do something about it, but she wants to talk to you first." "Why me?" I asked. "Because I found the first one?" Zephyr waved 3 hands. No, she simply needs an expert on off-world technology. She said the meal is free, so let's hurry." "Wait, what kind of off-world technology?" I asked. "That could mean anything. Why can't she use her influence to hire an expert?" "She is," Zephyr insisted. "That's you. This is how she operates, on favors and word of mouth. And she'll help us take down the smugglers." He said it like he had a personal vendetta against them. "You're sure it was them?" I pressed. "Yes!" He clawed at the air, stopping the motion with another hand, the equivalent of pounding a fist into a palm. "The cracked-in-the-egg mushbeaks," he hissed. "They're responsible for any number of illegal trades that have shot up to dangerous levels in the past few years. If I could get my claws on the person who sold them that stealth tech, I'd rend them to ribbons." I took in the way he was glaring off into the distance. "You don't say." The tirade that he let loose involved the death of a family member from eating too much of a banned food. This sounded something like the issues with mercury poisoning back home. Apparently, when the super tasty and super illegal delicacy had become easy to buy on the street, that relative had learned the hard way why it was banned, and Zephyr had never forgiven the smugglers for it. "Tie rocks to their feet and drown them in the sea," he concluded, waving all 4 hands dramatically. I nodded. He slumped against the wall, catching his breath and looking dejected. "All right," I said, standing. "Let's go see Lumi." He brightened immediately and scrambled upright. "Yes, they have a new lunch special today and everything. You'll have to tell me how it compares to the original Earth dish. It's supposed to be very authentic." He was off and talking as eagerly as usual, though with an undertone of determination that hadn't been there the last time I'd seen him. I was more than a little determined myself. Someone who could help take down the smugglers who were apparently responsible for the disaster? Yes, please. Now, if only this wasn't a massive trap by the criminal underground.